Yes, the honourable member for St. Michael Central.
Chair, Mr. Speaker. First of all, let me congratulate the Honourable Minister of Finance and his staff for the compilation of this year's estimates and expenditure 2018 to 2019, and also to commend the appropriation bill that is before this Honourable House for its vision and all that portends. I want to say at the beginning, Mr. Speaker, that this year's estimates and expenditure can already be categorized as a people's estimate. The presentation, Mr. Speaker, was unhinged from any cheap political gamesmanship and one-upmanship. It was administered with a heavy dose of realism and practicality, citing the times that we are currently in, and it was certainly tailored to sustaining the economic and social tapestry that is the Project Barbados. So against those comments, I want to compliment the Ministry and the Minister of Finance for the compilation of this year's estimates. Before I get into the meat of my presentation, though, a concern was raised yesterday on the floor of this honourable chamber, Mr. Speaker, by the honourable member for St. George North about the absenteeism of some members of this government. And he singled out the front bench, because on the front bench sits the members of the cabinet. And he says that we don't go to work, or sometimes we go to work half a day, a quarter day, and all kinds of days. But I wish to convey a message to the constituents of the 12 members of the Barbados Labour Party that sit in this House of Assembly. Because the constituents of these members of Parliament must know, it must be exposed, the performance of the members of the Barbados Labour Party. Now, the people of Barbados in their consciousness went to the polls in 2013 and elected 14 members of the Barbados Labour Party, and before half of the term could have been spent, they were down to 12 members as they are now. And the performance of the 12 members of the Barbados Labour Party, as they currently constitute the opposition in Barbados, is one that was categorized by sloth, laziness, a lack of appetite for work. They are known more for the in-attendance of Parliament, and they came in here by the vote of their constituents. The constituents wanted to hear their voices in Parliament representing their interests, and certainly the vast majority of them practice sloth, laziness, and lack of appetite for work. That is the track record of the current lot of Barbados Labour Party members of Parliament. When the reinstatement of the 10% was done, they said they didn't want back their 10%. But I think they should have surrendered 100%, because they are certainly vastly overpaid. Vastly overpaid. And I want the members of their constituencies individually and collectively to scold them severely whenever the bell is rung for general elections in this country. Some of them need a GPS or a radar to find this honourable House, Mr. Speaker. Some of them have not even come here for so long. They need a GPS. And some of their seats, although we reupholstered most of the seats in here, some of the seats didn't need any upholstering because of lack of wear. Some of the seats have not seen their rear ends for many, many weeks. Mr. Speaker, we in this government, we say up front that despite the predictions of calamity, near apocalyptic expectations, realization almost of Armageddon, and of course a total annihilation of Barbados as we know it, I want to say, as Bridget Blucher says in her song that is so familiar to most Barbadians, that we as a government, we are still here, and with God's grace and favor. And despite some of the negatives, as all of us would have heard in the economic report by the central bank recently, yes, we all acknowledge that the foreign reserves are down, and we know that the inflation rate is at 4%, and we know exactly why the inflation rate is at 4%. But there were more positives, Mr. Speaker, than negatives in that report. Substantially more positives than negatives. This, I understand, is a $9.5 billion economy. The central bank reported that we grew by 1%. We grow, of course, we have grown for the 3 consecutive years, the 3 consecutive quarters. We have seen growth in this country. Our fiscal deficit fell by $197 million, and what is significant about that? It is the lowest in 7 years in this country. The primary balance is in surplus of 2.4% of GDP. Tourism expanded by 1.2%. The banking system is stable like the Rock of Gibraltar. And the funding from the central bank, as most of my colleagues would have said yesterday, fell to $96.8 million compared with $714 for the corresponding year. All of those are positives, which I don't hear any of the economists on the side of the Barbados Labour Party talking about, because it is not in their interest. But it is in our interest to echo and trumpet these successes, because there are successes against some of the bad news that we would have been getting previously. Now, those are positive indicators that highlight economic measures, and the efforts that we have employed are bearing a measure of fruit. And we have to say, as a government, because the Barbados Labour Party and its acolytes are not going to say it for us. And building on these achievements, we are embarking on an even more maintainable roadmap. In the document that was laid in Parliament just a few days ago, the Barbados Sustainable Recovery Plan. It's a framework, a roadmap to take us into the future. To date, I want to say, like the honourable member for St. Michael Northwest said, there are no other rational, workable, sensible plans around. All of the social partnership are in concert with the plan and committed to its execution and to its success. I want to say to every single Barbadian in every village, in every hamlet, every community in Barbados, that this is our plan, the government's plan. It is your plan. I'm talking about the old girl down in Dutchman Hall and the old man down in Indian Ground. This is your plan. It is the social partnerships plan. It is the mother of all plans. And there is no other plan in town. Now, the Barbados Labour Party say it is not their plan. So the Barbados Labour Party's 12 members are standing on the deck like the burning deck. They referred to it yesterday as piffle. Their exact words, Mr. Speaker. They say the social partnership is worth nothing, that the contents of the plan is piffle, wrapped in dirty Christmas paper. These are their words, Mr. Speaker, and not worth the paper that it is printed on. Now, I want to commend this plan to the Barbadian public and to say clearly, this is the roadmap, this is the framework which this government, the government that you elected in 2013, will pursue to guide us over the next number of years. Now, with all that is said about the economy, Mr. Speaker, be reminded that the sound social safety net and its offerings count for something in this country. We have a vibrant and robust safety net in Barbados. And as Minister of Social Care, I will consistently and constantly remind Barbadians what the sound social service structure of Barbados is about and the soundness of it. I maintain that our national safety net, Mr. Speaker, can be compared with any first world country in the world, any first world country. Right now, in some first world countries, the services that we take for granted in Barbados are now being fought for in some of those first world countries, like health care and education opportunities. All of these hurdles we have crossed and conquered in this country. National provisioning to the indigent, always one of the focal points of this Democratic Labour Party administration. The welfare and stability of our citizens figure prominently in all of our social engineering and re-engineering and our social planning. And that has always been our ethos as a party since the founding of this party back in April 1955. That has been our philosophy, our ethos, our guiding light. Provisioning it back, of course, Mr. Speaker, to the poor law culture that found Barbados in a miserable and deprived Barbados back in those days. And that, of course, those poor law situations ushered into Barbados a specter of almshouses and soup kitchens, other demeaning and degrading features of the Barbados of that era. And I want to say most of that era was presided over by a person with a familiar surname to the leader of the opposition. When Barbadians had to herd themselves down to Queen's Park in a demoralized position, waiting for keiki and waiting for park food and all of that, this Democratic Labour Party administration, on assumption of office, said all of these things must be rid of. And we must bring Barbadian society and bring Barbadian people into a kind of the realm of emancipation, both from a point of view of economics and social emancipation. This prompted the Democratic Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, to enact the National Assistance Act back in 1969. And this was principally to elevate our people from the throes of abject poverty and destitution, introducing relief to bring them out of that situation, introducing relief, Mr. Speaker, to the needy, either by grant or by money or by non-medical assistance, and focusing primary objective to alleviating and eradicating poverty wherever it exists in Barbados across the length and breadth of this 166 square mile country. Now this is coupled, of course, Mr. Speaker, with a suite of previous legislation, including, but not limited to, the National Insurance and Social Security Act of 1966. And I dare say, Mr. Speaker, that that particular act, that particular piece of legislation, is the axle on which all other social benefits revolve and rotate. The National Insurance and Social Security Act of 1966, enacted by the then Democratic Labour Party administration. This particular piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, provided for sickness benefits, maternity benefits, invalidity benefits, funeral and old age contributory grants, non-contributory and old age pensions, and survivors' benefits. It revolutionized the social scene in Barbados in that era. So these are all precursors, Mr. Speaker, to what we now have in terms of assisting each Bajan, each single Bajan, wherever they are located, who are faced with one need of assistance or the other. In Barbados, I dare say, Mr. Speaker, there's a solution for almost every single case of social assistance. And I say that because I head a ministry that is in the forefront, in the vanguard of supplying social relief and social benefits. And I say that if anybody presents to any of the social agencies that fall under the purview and superintendence of the Ministry of Social Care, there is an answer that can be found. And I believe that those social service offerings also extend to other ministries, like the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. Now, all of this social assistance, Mr. Speaker, is a result of a solid and viable education system, free from preschool, nursery, primary, and tertiary and secondary level. A first-rate affordable healthcare apparatus, the QEH, and a network of polyclinics. And I heard the Honourable Member for St. John speaking about the St. John Polyclinic, now known as the David Thompson Polyclinic. That one was left languishing by this Barbados Labour Party. And as the Honourable Member for St. John said, with spiting the people of St. John. We have to resuscitate that on our return to government. We have a reliable welfare and social assistance program offering a suite of benefits. And like I said before, I sit at the top of a ministry that actually offer these welfare assistance, so I know, and benefits, so I know exactly of what I speak. A sustainable social security system, which is the flagship of sustenance to our livelihoods as a people. Now, I reflected in social sector indicators, surely points to the fact that all of these sectors which I just itemized are solid and in most cases affordable, because most of these services are afforded free at the point of delivery. And it is reflected in the social sector indicators up to 2016. In Barbados, the adult literacy rate is 99.7%. Almost every single Bajan could read and comprehend and exposed to a level of education. The life expectancy is 78 years. And of course, we have one of the highest rates of centenarians in the hemisphere, and certainly only competes with a small city in Japan. That is commendable. Over 113 centenarians in Barbados just last year. The figures are not in yet for this year. That is commendable, and it speaks to the healthcare and other facilities and social care facilities in Barbados. And our expenditure, in terms of our expenditure, 24% of the total expenditure that government puts out goes to education, and 15.5% goes to health. Now, Mr. Speaker, despite all of these fundamental foundational structures, other efforts have to be planned and implemented to catch and secure those cases and plights of people who are more acute than most of us in this country. And one such program, Mr. Speaker, that I want to spend a little time on is the question of the IC Bridge program. Now, IC is an acronym. This represents Identification, Stabilization, Empowerment, and Enablement. Its goal is to move poor and vulnerable people from a state of dependency to one of empowerment. That is the final stage, empowerment, so people can step off independently for the first time in their lives. The IC Bridge is an adaptation of the Chilean Puente program, and we identified 30 families across the length and breadth of Barbados, one in every constituency, that are or were affected by intergenerational poverty. We all know what intergenerational poverty is. All of us who grew up in working class communities would know of a family or a number of families who for generations experienced poverty-stricken situations. We put household facilitators to every single household, and we started the pilot back in 2012, a 2-year pilot, which ended in 2014. Those first set of families in the pilot graduated of the program, feeling enabled and empowered. The second iteration, between 2015 and 2017, that was initiated with an additional 30 new families, again identified across the Barbados, one in each constituency, and selected not by any political favor, but selected by the social workers within the social service agencies in Barbados. I deliberately stayed out of the selection because I wanted this thing to be free of any political interference or political selection. And with all of the psychosocial interventions now completed, last Saturday evening at the Courtney Blackman Grand Salle, we had the graduation for the second group in the second iteration of this IC Bridge project. And I looked at the faces of those households and saw independence. I saw independence etched on their face. Enablement and empowerment etched on the faces of the members of those 30 families. Those households benefited from education and human resource development, assistance with common entrance exams, course and exam fees being paid for them, additional lessons to prepare them for the CXC exams. Adults, some of the adults, for the first time in their lives, before or after this program was introduced, they were able to gain grade 1s and grade 2 passes because of the assistance of this program, holding their hands and lifting themselves up by their own bootstraps for the first time in their lives. Household members found jobs, temporary and permanent, after assistance with CV writings and, of course, application writing. Now, during the last financial year, we allocated some $100,000, and that was expended on the households, helping them to access benefits, including national assistance grants, child support, funeral assistance, food and uniform, and, of course, furniture vouchers. An additional $36,000 was provided for households to receive $100 monthly. Each household is given a stipend of $100 monthly in their bank accounts because they now have what they call cards to access this amount, of course, to meet small but urgent needs that would be needed, of course, before they can get to the social service agencies for assistance. Counseling was offered to a number of households, and some housing was provided through the Icy Bridge and the Poverty Alleviation and Reduction Program. Repairs and complete rebuilds. Currently, as we speak, Mr. Speaker, we have 4 houses being constructed, and 8 more are at the Chief Town Planner for approval. Now, as Minister, I want to say that I am really passionate about this particular program. I'm pleased as Punch with its outcomes since 2012. And I pledge the Ministry and the government's continued support as we roll out a new phase in our new term of government between 2018 and 2023, if it be the will of God. Now, coming on the heels of this graduation, there's the Icy Bridge graduation on Saturday night. Tomorrow, which is today really, I will have to leave for a short while and journey to the Lloyd Erskine Sanford Center, where the IDB and China Co-Financing Fund for Latin American Caribbean, strengthening human and social development in Barbados. That is a program that came on the wings of, or on the heels of this Icy Bridge project. An expansion of the Icy Bridge program from 30 families to an additional 250 families. That is about 8 families per constituency. And we will be offering similar interventions, similar psychosocial support by the facilitators. And currently, we have 103 households, or 790 individuals, who are exposed to this particular intervention through the IDB and the China Co-Financing Fund for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we're going to have an event this afternoon where we will be introducing the families. And I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that all benefits I outlined for the Icy Bridge will accrue to these households in terms of education assistance, employment attachments, income and social benefits, and of course, what is pivotal in all of this are the health checks. A total of 280 households will be empowered at the end of both of these programs. Now, beyond what we establish with those programs to assist our people, to bring them from a stage of a poverty-stricken stage to a stage of enablement and empowerment, we, in our consciousness as a government, Mr. Speaker, established the constituency councils very early in our term. It was one of the 3 social service interventions that this government employed, along with the summer camps and the free bus rides for school children. We allocate every single year, despite what the Barbados Labour Party says about this program. I heard one member of the Barbados Labour Party say that we pour in $30 million into the Constituency Council program. Nothing, Mr. Speaker, is further from the truth. We have allocated every single year just $3 million to this program. And I want to say that of that $3 million, $1.1 million goes to our salaries and personal emoluments, leaving just about $36,000 per council per year. And they have been spending this wisely. This program has proven so beneficial to our constituencies, Mr. Speaker, in the face of severe ridicule from the Barbados Labour Party. These councils have provided relief from school supplies, minor repairs, debushing programs, assistance for sporting groups, awards of community leaders, provision for market days, planning and execution of the David Thompson tournament. And I'm going to get back to the David Thompson tournament. And it also provides planning and execution of the National Senior Games. The planning and execution of those games now fall under the direct superintendence of the Department of Constituency Empowerment. Let me say this, and I want this to be heard by everyone in Barbados, and especially the people that are particularly positively impacted by the presence of the David Thompson Constituency Council Football Classic. I speak to the vendors, the young men and women who participate in the tournament. There are 30 constituencies, and we have about 15 young men and women participating as footballers. That brings it about 450 young men and women between October and December that are positively engaged in wholesome activities. The commentators, the spectators, the entrepreneurs, I want to speak directly to them because I want to tell them unequivocally and clearly that if the Barbados Labour Party comes to office after the next year election, you can kiss the David Thompson Constituency Council Football Classic goodbye. It is clear they have indicated it by voicing it and by their actions. It's the best out-of-season football tournament in Barbados at this time and offers performance fees and also good first, second, third, and fourth prizes to the teams. And I want to tell them clearly, vendors, young men and women, commentators, spectators, all involved in the David Thompson tournament, that if the Barbados Labour Party comes to office, the 2017 tournament was the last. The activation program, which involves the senior games, and the attendance of the athletes, the senior athletes, at the Huntsman Senior Games. If the Barbados Labour Party comes to office, that too will come to a screeching halt. Because I remember about 2 or 3 years ago, the Barbados Labour Party leader washing her mouth on the senior athletes in Barbados, saying it was a waste of money. Well, if it is a waste of money, the $100,000 that this government, through the Ministry of Social Care, allocates to the senior games, and the $140,000 allocated to the attendance of the athletes at the Huntsman Senior Games, if that is money badly spent, I plead guilty. And this government pleads guilty also. A program that has found its footing, positively reigniting community participation and rejuvenating grassroots involvement and placing governance in the hands of the people of Barbados. That is what the Constituency Council program has done, and it has used, of course, as a catalyst, sports and culture to promote their programs. I want to tell the people of Barbados again, if the Barbados Labour Party comes to office, they can kiss these programs goodbye. Now, our economy, Mr. Speaker, I want to get to something before my time finishes. If our economy is driven, Mr. Speaker.
Which will be soon.
5 minutes? More? I just want to know how much more time to.
No, you have just about exhausted your time. I'll give you another 3 minutes to win. You start,
okay.
You start at 10:25.
I want to deal with this. Now, our economy is driven to a large extent by tourism. We experienced some growth over the last few years, but could have done so better were it not for some delays in rolling out some of our programs. Now, my comrade, the honorable member for St. Lucie, was bludgeoned because he labeled anyone who stands in the way of government's projects as enemies of the state. Now, I thought at the time that that was a mild characterization. I thought that was mild. Now, if that person was an ordinary person or a regular citizen, for instance, a Miss Mapp in Fortescue, or Miss Clark down in Lemon Arbor, or Miss Culpeper in Content Court, or Miss Cavenbach in Lonesome Hill, I would understand where that person is coming from. But the person who, or Miss Mason in Bayfield, but the person who is erecting these stumbling blocks, Mr. Speaker, is a government mainstream political operative, involved and associated through politics and family connections with the Barbados Labour Party. Immersed in politics of the day, that person speaks with clarity on things political partisan and says nothing positive about this Democratic Labour Party administration, and categorized this administration as the worst since adult suffrage. He has taken this administration to court before, and he plans to take it again. And how do I know he's a political operative, Mr. Speaker? Not only because he's locked hand in hand up front in the Barbados Labour Party marches and protestation.
Yes.
I know.
Just a minute. Just remember. Let's hear the. Yes. 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 Was it?
If he wishes to speak about court cases, let him talk about Kerper Investments, Inc.
I remember, no point of order. Please sit down.
$107,000.
Sit down and shut up.
Suit number 646
I remember.
of 2011. Let's see whether he has...
I am not going to take that nonsense, all right? I am not going to take that nonsense.
If you want to talk about court, let me talk about that.
I remember. I know you might not have anything to contribute today. I don't mind putting you out. I am not going to hear that nonsense. I don't mind you look at me either, Mr. Simmons. Please continue.
Thank you very much, Speaker. This particular person of which I speak, in 2008, handed in his nomination papers at Combermere School, right next to me. In 2008, that person's name, because
I remember, just a minute. I remember you will have your time to speak. That's when you can talk about your court cases or wherever you want to. I remember, just a minute, I'm speaking. I remember you have, the rules are, once you are given, once you're recognized, you can speak for your 30 minutes, and you can say whatever you want to say within the confines of the rules,
sir.
not rules that I set. And that is what I try to enforce.
No problem.
But I'm not going to take this thing you get from a point of order just to put in something that has nothing to do with the thing. All right, please continue.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'll wrap up by just saying this, Mr. Speaker. I ignore.
Yes, please wrap it because your time has expired.
I will wrap up by saying this. So when he or my honourable colleague was bludgeoned, I say to you, Mr. Speaker, and I say to this honourable House, that that was a mild characterization of that particular person, because he's a political operative, pure and simple. He has no legitimacy for his actions, because I remember seeing his name on the ballot paper in St. Michael's Central back in 2008. When the votes were counted, I got 2,289. Rudy Grant got 1,880.
Don't call his name.
Well, okay.
Good.
My opponent from the Barbados Labour Party, and that particular person got the grand sum of 69 votes, or 0.2% of the votes cast in that particular election, where 4,169 votes were cast. Therefore, he has no legitimacy for his action. Not even 100 persons voted for him in that general election. Mr. Speaker, I am satisfied as a member of this government that most of our economic indicators are going in the right direction, with corrective action being taken to shore up the reserves. You heard that from the Honourable Minister of Finance. The social safety net is sustainable and sound. Barbados is closer to a first world status than it is to a third world position. Our citizens can be assured there is no plan to take us forward but the Barbados Sustainable Recovery Plan. It is homegrown, conceptualized by local ingenuity, nurtured by input of the social partnership, infused by a cross-section of interests and stakeholders, and will have oversight by consortium of social partners in the government, in business, and in the trade unions. Mr. Speaker, I commend these 2018-19 estimates and expenditure and this appropriation bill that is before this Honourable House, and I also commend the Barbados Recovery Plan. And may God Almighty have his way with all of them as they're being planned and executed. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
I'm obliged.